Welcome to a peaceful journey through the tranquil island archipelagos of the South Pacific. As you settle in, allow your mind to drift with us across the vast, gentle waters that embrace thousands of islands scattered like stars across the deep blue canvas of the Pacific Ocean. These serene fragments of land have emerged from the sea over countless millennia, each one a unique sanctuary of calm in one of our planet's most expansive and peaceful regions. The South Pacific encompasses a sweeping maritime region that extends from the equator to the southern reaches of the ocean, spreading eastward from Australia and Southeast Asia toward the distant shores of South America. Within this immense aquatic realm lie more than 25,000 islands, varying in size from tiny coral atolls measuring just a few hundred meters across to substantial landmasses covering thousands of square kilometers. Together, these islands represent only about 2% of the region's total area, with the remaining 98% consisting of the deep, peaceful waters of the Pacific. As we begin our journey tonight, imagine yourself resting comfortably on the soft, warm sands of a peaceful shore, looking out across calm lagoon waters toward the distant horizon where sea meets sky in a perfect line of blue. The air is pleasantly warm and carries the gentle scents of tropical flowers and salt spray. Take a deep breath and allow yourself to relax completely as we explore these tranquil island realms together. The islands we'll be visiting tonight began forming many millions of years ago through two primary processes that continue with imperceptible slowness to this day. The first process involves volcanic activity, where molten rock rises from deep within the earth to break through the ocean floor, gradually building mountains that eventually emerge above the water's surface. The second process involves the growth of coral reefs, where tiny marine organisms construct massive calcium carbonate structures that, over thousands of years, may rise to the ocean surface and create low-lying atolls and islands. The archipelagos of Polynesia, Melanesia, and Micronesia comprise the main island groups of the South Pacific, each with its own distinct characteristics and peaceful presence in the vast ocean. These island clusters contain high volcanic mountains on some islands, gently sloping coastal plains, and perfectly flat coral atolls that rise only a few meters above the surrounding sea, their forms creating a beautiful diversity across the Pacific landscape. Throughout human history, these islands have served as tranquil havens for oceanic peoples who developed remarkable navigational skills, allowing them to voyage across thousands of kilometers of open water to settle even the most remote islands. Ancient seafarers would follow the stars, ocean swells, cloud patterns, and migratory birds to find their way across the seemingly featureless expanse of the Pacific. The islands themselves remained largely unchanged, offering shelter and sustenance to generations of inhabitants who developed deep connections to these isolated yet nurturing environments. As we continue our journey tonight, explore the gentle topography of these archipelagos, their lagoon and reef systems, climate patterns, and the peaceful relationship between the islands and the people who have made their homes on these small pieces of land amid the vast Pacific. The steady, unchanging rhythm of waves meeting shore offers us a perfect metaphor for finding tranquility in our own lives. The constant, gentle motion that remains fundamentally balanced regardless of changing conditions. Let your breath become slow and steady like the gentle ocean swells that flow across these peaceful waters. Allow your body to feel heavy and comfortable, supported just as these islands are supported by the solid earth beneath the ocean floor. As we continue our exploration, you may find your mind drifting peacefully between wakefulness and sleep, and that is perfectly fine. The islands have existed for thousands of years and will continue their quiet presence long after our journey together concludes. The island archipelagos of the South Pacific display several distinctive topographical forms, each created through different geological processes operating over immense spans of time. The high volcanic islands, such as those found in the Hawaiian chain, the Marquesas, and parts of Samoa, feature substantial mountains that may rise to elevations exceeding 1,000 meters above sea level. The highest of these volcanic peaks is Mauna Kea in Hawaii, which reaches 4,207 meters above the ocean surface. If measured from its true base on the ocean floor, this remarkable mountain stands more than 10,000 meters tall, making it technically taller than Mount Everest when measured from base to summit. The topography of these high islands is characterized by steep, often conical peaks with gently sloping sides that extend down to the ocean. Many feature calderas, which are large, bowl-shaped depressions formed when the summit of a volcano collapses following an eruption. These calderas may fill with water over time, creating peaceful crater lakes that reflect the surrounding landscape in mirror-like stillness. The slopes of volcanic islands are frequently dissected by valleys carved by flowing water, creating radial drainage patterns that extend from the central peaks toward the coast like spokes from the hub of a wheel. Moving away from the high volcanic islands, we encounter the slightly lower raised limestone islands, such as Niue and parts of Tonga. These islands were formerly atolls that have been lifted above sea level by tectonic forces, creating table-like plateaus surrounded by steep cliffs that descend to narrow coastal plains. The surfaces of these elevated limestone formations feature karst topography, with numerous sinkholes, caves, and underground drainage channels formed as rainwater slowly dissolves the calcium carbonate rock. The coral atolls represent a third major island type found throughout the Pacific, particularly in the archipelagos of Micronesia and eastern Polynesia. These low-lying islands form perfect or nearly perfect rings around central lagoons, the entire structure resting atop ancient submarine volcanoes that have sunk beneath the ocean surface. The process that creates these circular islands begins with a fringing reef that surrounds a volcanic island. As the volcanic island gradually subsides due to the weight of the basaltic rock and the natural settling of the ocean floor, the coral continues to grow upward, maintaining its position near the water's surface. Eventually, the central volcano disappears completely beneath the waves, leaving only the ring of coral, which may accumulate broken coral fragments, sand, and soil sufficient to rise a few meters above sea level. These coral atolls typically rise just 2 to 5 meters above the high tide line, their low profiles creating a landscape of endless horizons where the distinction between sea and sky becomes the dominant visual element. The rings of land that form atolls are typically quite narrow, often measuring between 100 and 500 meters in width, though they may extend for many kilometers in length as they curve around their central lagoons. Tuamatu Archipelago in French Polynesia contains some of the world's largest atolls, with Rangiroa measuring 80 kilometers in length, while never exceeding 500 meters in width. Between the various island types, we find extensive reef systems that create complex underwater topographies. Fringing reefs grow along the shorelines of many islands, extending outward from the coast for distances of 100 to 1,000 meters. Barrier reefs form farther offshore, separated from the island by a lagoon that may be several kilometers wide and 10 to 70 meters deep. The Great Barrier Reef along Australia's northeastern coast represents the largest such structure in the world, extending for more than 2,300 kilometers and containing nearly 3,000 individual reef segments. The lagoons that form between islands and their surrounding reefs create protected aquatic environments with remarkably calm waters. These lagoons vary in size from small pocket bays measuring a few hundred meters across to enormous enclosed water bodies like the lagoon of Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands, which encompasses 2,174 square kilometers of protected water. The depth of these lagoons typically ranges from 10 to 80 meters, with generally deeper waters found in the lagoons of more mature atolls. The seafloor surrounding Pacific islands drops away at varying rates depending on the geological context. Volcanic islands often feature relatively steep submarine slopes that may descend several thousand meters within just 5 to 10 kilometers of shore. Atolls typically rise from underwater platforms that extend outward for several kilometers before dropping into the deep ocean. The transitions between these shallow platforms and the deep ocean floor are marked by steep escarpments that may descend at angles of 45 degrees or more, creating dramatic underwater cliffs that plunge into the darkness of the deep Pacific. The ocean floor itself contains remarkable topographical features, including submarine mountains called seamounts, deep trenches that mark the boundaries between tectonic plates, and vast abyssal plains that extend for thousands of kilometers at depths of 4,000 to 6,000 meters. The Mariana Trench, located in the western Pacific, contains the deepest point on Earth, reaching a depth of 10,994 meters below sea level at the location known as Challenger Deep. Throughout the Pacific Basin, we find numerous underwater volcanic features, many of which are actively building toward the surface, but have not yet emerged as islands. These submarine volcanoes, or seamounts, number in the thousands, with estimates suggesting more than 10,000 seamounts rising at least 1,000 meters above the surrounding seafloor. Only a small percentage of these underwater mountains have been thoroughly mapped or studied, leaving much of the Pacific's submarine topography still largely unknown. The beaches that surround Pacific islands display various characteristics depending on their geological origin and exposure to ocean swells. Many volcanic islands feature beaches of black or dark gray sand, composed of fine particles of basaltic rock. Coral islands and atolls are surrounded by brilliant white sand beaches formed from the skeletal remains of marine organisms, ground into fine particles by wave action over thousands of years. Some specialized beaches, like the famous pink beach of Komodo Island, derive their color from the red shells of tiny marine organisms called foraminifera, which mix with white coral sand to create a pale rose hue. The coastal zones of Pacific islands vary from steep cliffs where mountains meet the sea directly to wide, gradually sloping plains that extend inland for several kilometers. Many islands feature a combination of these shoreline types, with different coastal configurations occurring around the island's perimeter, depending on wind and wave exposure, the underlying geological structure, and the presence or absence of protective reef systems. The island archipelagos of the South Pacific cover a total ocean area of approximately 40 million square kilometers, which represents roughly 30% of the Pacific Ocean's total surface area. Within this vast maritime region, the actual land area of all islands combined amounts to approximately 550,000 square kilometers, or just 1.375% of the region's total area. This disparity between land and water underscores the predominantly oceanic nature of the South Pacific environment. The Polynesian Triangle, which extends from Hawaii in the north to New Zealand in the southwest and Easter Island in the southeast, encompasses an area of approximately 25 million square kilometers. Within this enormous triangular region, the total land area is only about 300,000 square kilometers, of which New Zealand's two main islands account for roughly 268,000 square kilometers. The remaining 32,000 square kilometers of Polynesian land are distributed across more than 1,000 islands scattered throughout the triangle. Melanesia, which includes the island groups of Fiji, Vanuatu, the Solomon Islands, and Papua New Guinea, contains the largest landmass in the South Pacific region. Papua New Guinea alone covers 462,840 square kilometers, making it the largest Pacific island. The total land area of Melanesia is approximately 940,000 square kilometers, distributed across approximately 2,000 islands of varying sizes. Micronesia, comprising the island nations of Kiribati, Marshall Islands, Federated States of Micronesia, Nauru, and Palau, contains the smallest total land area of the three major Pacific divisions. The combined land area of all Micronesian islands is approximately 3,100 square kilometers, distributed across more than 2,100 individual islands and atolls. The average land area per island in Micronesia is just 1.47 square kilometers, reflecting the predominantly small, low-lying atoll nature of this region. The Pacific Ocean contains approximately 25,000 islands in total, representing roughly 17% of all islands on Earth. Of these Pacific islands, approximately 3,800 are inhabited, while the remaining 21,200 are uninhabited. The sizes of these islands vary tremendously, with the largest, New Guinea, covering 785,753 square kilometers, when including both Papua New Guinea and Indonesia's West Papua, while the smallest inhabited islands may cover less than 1 square kilometer. The highest point in the Pacific Islands is Mount Wilhelm in Papua New Guinea, which reaches an elevation of 4,509 meters above sea level. By contrast, the highest elevation on many atoll nations, such as Tuvalu and the Marshall Islands, is just 4 to 5 meters above sea level. The average elevation across all Pacific Islands, when weighted by land area, is approximately 160 meters above sea level. Though this figure is heavily influenced by the mountainous terrain of the larger islands, the total coastline length of all Pacific Islands combined measures approximately 135,000 kilometers. If placed end to end, this would be sufficient to encircle the Earth at the equator more than 3 times. The ratio of coastline to land area for Pacific Islands averages about 1 kilometer of coast per 4 square kilometers of land, which is more than 5 times the global average ratio. This reflects the highly fragmented nature of the Pacific's land masses and their predominantly coastal character. The coral reef systems of the South Pacific cover approximately 110,000 square kilometers in total area, representing roughly 40% of the world's reef areas. These reef systems range in age from newly formed structures less than 100 years old to ancient formations that have been actively growing for more than 500,000 years. The average growth rate of coral reefs is approximately 1 to 2 centimeters per year vertically, though this can vary considerably depending on water temperature, clarity, and nutrient availability. The volume of coral material in Pacific reef systems is estimated at 6.8 trillion cubic meters. If this material were spread evenly across the land area of all Pacific islands, it would create a layer approximately 12.4 meters thick. The weight of this coral material is estimated at roughly 15 trillion metric tons, making coral reefs the largest biological structures on Earth. The lagoons enclosed by atoll formations in the Pacific contain approximately 8,400 square kilometers of protected water. The average depth of these lagoon systems is 35 meters, resulting in a total water volume of approximately 294 billion cubic meters. If distributed equally among the approximately 12 million residents of the Pacific Island nations, this would provide each person with 24,500 cubic meters of lagoon water, which is roughly equivalent to the volume of 10 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The distance between islands in the Pacific varies considerably depending on the archipelago. In closely grouped island chains such as Fiji or the Solomon Islands, adjacent islands may be separated by just 1 to 5 kilometers of water. In more dispersed archipelagos like the Marshall Islands or Kiribati, the distances between neighboring atolls typically range from 50 to 200 kilometers. The most isolated islands, such as Easter Island, Rapa Nui, are separated from their nearest neighbors by more than 2,000 kilometers of open ocean. The total number of distinct linguistic groups across the Pacific Islands is approximately 1,200, representing roughly 19% of all languages spoken globally. Papua New Guinea alone contains more than 800 distinct languages, making it the most linguistically diverse nation on Earth. By contrast, some smaller island nations, such as Tuvalu or Niue, have just a single indigenous language. The Pacific Islands are distributed across 14 independent nations and 11 territories or dependencies associated with countries such as the United States, France, New Zealand, and Australia. The largest Pacific Island nation by population is Papua New Guinea, with approximately 9 million residents. The smallest is Niue, with a population of about 1,600 people. The land area devoted to agriculture across all Pacific Islands amounts to approximately 66,000 square kilometers, or roughly 12% of the total land area. Of this agricultural land, approximately 27,000 square kilometers is used for permanent crops, such as coconut palms, banana plants, and breadfruit trees. The remaining 39,000 square kilometers is used for shifting cultivation or periodic cropping. The combined exclusive economic zones, EEZs, of Pacific Island nations cover approximately 30.5 million square kilometers of ocean, which represents about 8.5% of the world's total ocean area. Kiribati, despite having a land area of just 811 square kilometers, controls an EEZ of 3.5 million square kilometers, a ratio of more than 4,300 square kilometers of ocean for each square kilometer of land. The climate of the South Pacific Island archipelagos is predominantly tropical, characterized by warm temperatures, high humidity, and distinctive patterns of rainfall that vary by location and season. The prevailing climate conditions are influenced by several factors, including latitude, ocean currents, prevailing wind patterns, and the size and elevation of individual islands. Average annual temperatures across most of the South Pacific Islands range from 24 to 28 degrees Celsius, with remarkably little variation throughout the year. Daytime maximum temperatures typically reach 29 to 32 degrees Celsius, while nighttime minimums generally remain between 21 and 24 degrees Celsius. This limited diurnal temperature range of 8 to 10 degrees is characteristic of maritime tropical climates, where the surrounding ocean moderates temperature extremes. The seasonal temperature variation is equally modest, with average temperatures in the warmest month typically only 1 to 3 degrees Celsius higher than in the coolest month. This minimal seasonal variation increases slightly with distance from the equator, with islands in the southern portions of Polynesia experiencing somewhat more pronounced seasonal differences than those near the equator. The water temperature surrounding Pacific Islands exhibits similar stability, with surface temperatures typically ranging from 25 to 29 degrees Celsius throughout the year. In the open ocean, the temperature of surface waters may vary by only 1 to 2 degrees between seasons. In shallower lagoon environments, the range may be slightly greater, with variations of 3 to 4 degrees between the warmest and coolest months. Precipitation patterns in the South Pacific are more variable than temperature, both spatially and temporally. Average annual rainfall ranges from as little as 750 millimeters on some of the drier islands in the rain shadow of larger landmasses to more than 4,000 millimeters on the windward slopes of high volcanic islands. The easternmost islands of Polynesia generally receive less rainfall than the western Pacific islands of Melanesia, reflecting their position relative to the prevailing easterly trade winds. The seasonal distribution of rainfall varies by latitude and position within the Pacific Basin. Islands located within 5 to 8 degrees of the equator typically experience relatively consistent precipitation throughout the year, with monthly rainfall amounts varying by less than 30% from the annual average. Islands located further from the equator, between 8 and 15 degrees latitude, generally experience more pronounced wet and dry seasons, with 70 to 80% of annual precipitation falling during the 5 to 6 month wet season. The timing of wet and dry seasons is influenced by the movement of the Intertropical Convergence Zone, ITCZ, a band of low pressure that circles the Earth near the equator. In the Northern Hemisphere summer, May to October, the ITCZ shifts northward, bringing increased rainfall to islands north of the equator. During the Southern Hemisphere summer, November to April, the ITCZ moves southward, bringing wetter conditions to islands south of the equator. Humidity levels remain consistently high throughout the South Pacific, with average relative humidity ranging from 70 to 85% year-round. Humidity tends to be highest during early morning hours, often reaching 90 to 95%, and lowest in mid-afternoon, when it may drop to 60 to 70%. This high moisture content in the air contributes to the perception of heat in the tropical environment, as it reduces the body's ability to cool through perspiration. The prevailing wind patterns across the South Pacific are dominated by the trade winds, which blow consistently from the east or southeast across most of the region. These winds typically maintain average speeds of 15 to 25 kilometers per hour, with stronger flows of 25 to 35 kilometers per hour during winter months. The steadiness of these trade winds creates predictable conditions for sailing and contributes to the moderate temperatures by providing constant air movement. On larger, higher islands, the interaction between trade winds and topography creates distinctive local wind patterns. Windward slopes receive the full force of the moisture-laden trade winds, resulting in greater cloud cover and precipitation. Leeward slopes, sheltered from these prevailing winds, experience clearer skies and significantly less rainfall, often creating semi-arid microclimates in the rain shadows of mountain ranges. Local diurnal wind patterns also develop on high islands due to differential heating and cooling of land and sea. During daylight hours, the land heats more rapidly than the surrounding ocean, causing air to rise over the islands and draw in cooler air from offshore, a phenomenon known as a sea breeze. At night, the process reverses as the land cools more quickly than the ocean, causing air to flow from the higher elevations down toward the coast. The South Pacific experiences periodic disruptions to these typical climate patterns due to the El Niño Southern Oscillation (ENSO) cycle. During El Niño events, which occur every 3 to 7 years and typically last 9 to 12 months, sea surface temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific increase by 1 to 3 degrees Celsius above normal. This warming alters atmospheric circulation patterns, shifting rainfall away from the western Pacific and toward the central Pacific islands. During El Niño conditions, islands in the western Pacific, such as Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu, may experience drought conditions, with rainfall reduced by 30 to 60% below normal levels. Simultaneously, islands in the central Pacific, such as Kiribati, Tuvalu, and the eastern portions of Fiji, may receive 200 to 300% of their normal precipitation, leading to flooding and associated challenges. The opposite phase of the ENSO cycle, known as La Niña, produces essentially reversed conditions, with cooler than normal sea surface temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific. During La Niña events, the western Pacific islands receive above average rainfall, while the central and eastern Pacific islands experience drier than normal conditions. The cyclone season in the South Pacific extends from November to April, corresponding to the Southern Hemisphere summer. During this period, tropical cyclones may form over warm ocean waters and move across the island groups, bringing intense rainfall and strong winds. On average, approximately 8 to 10 tropical cyclones form in the South Pacific basin each year, though only 2 to 4 typically reach the most severe categories. The frequency of cyclone activity varies considerably across the region. The southwestern Pacific, including Vanuatu, New Caledonia, and Fiji, experiences the highest frequency, with a particular island having a 30 to 40% chance of being affected by a cyclone in any given year. The central South Pacific has a moderate frequency, with islands experiencing cyclone effects every 3 to 5 years on average. The eastern Pacific, near the Marquesas, and Easter Island rarely experiences cyclonic activity. Cloud cover across the South Pacific averages approximately 50 to 70% annually, with higher percentages occurring during the respective wet seasons of each hemisphere. High islands typically experience greater cloud cover over their elevated interior regions, where clouds may shroud mountain peaks 60 to 80% of the time. Low-lying atolls generally have clearer skies, with cloud cover averaging 40 to 60% throughout the year. The solar radiation received by Pacific Islands is among the highest on Earth, particularly when cloud cover is minimal. The average daily solar radiation ranges from 5 to 7 kilowatt hours per square meter, with the highest values occurring during the respective hemispheres' summer months. This intense sunlight contributes to the rapid heating of land surfaces during daylight hours and supports the luxuriant plant growth that characterizes many island ecosystems. The human geography of the South Pacific Island archipelagos reflects complex patterns of settlement, adaptation, and cultural development that have unfolded over thousands of years. Archaeological evidence suggests that human arrival in near Oceania, which includes New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, occurred at least 40,000 years ago during periods of lower sea levels when inter-island distances were reduced. Settlement of remote Oceania, including the more distant archipelagos of Micronesia and Polynesia, began much later, with the earliest evidence dating to approximately 3,500 to 3,000 years ago. The current population of the South Pacific Island nations and territories is approximately 12 million people, distributed unevenly across the region. Papua New Guinea accounts for roughly 75% of this total, with about 9 million inhabitants. The remaining 3 million residents are spread across the other island groups, from relatively populous Fiji, with about 900,000 people, to tiny Niue, with fewer than 2,000 residents. Population density varies dramatically throughout the Pacific Islands, from less than 20 people per square kilometer in parts of Melanesia to more than 1,000 people per square kilometer on some urbanized atolls. The nation of Nauru, measuring just 21 square kilometers, has a population density of approximately 541 people per square kilometer. By contrast, Papua New Guinea has a density of only 19 people per square kilometer, reflecting its large land area and mountainous interior regions that remain sparsely populated. Traditional settlement patterns across the Pacific Islands have been strongly influenced by environmental factors, particularly the availability of fresh water, arable land, and access to marine resources. On high volcanic islands, settlements historically developed along the coastal plains and lower valleys, where soils were fertile and level ground was available for cultivation. On atolls and low islands, communities typically established themselves on the wider portions of the land ring, often on the leeward side, where protection from prevailing winds was greatest. The highest population densities are now found in the urban centers that have developed on many of the larger islands. Suva, the capital of Fiji, has approximately 94,000 residents within the city proper, though the greater urban area contains roughly 175,000 people. Port Moresby, the capital of Papua New Guinea, has a population of approximately 380,000. These urban centers typically developed around natural harbors that facilitated maritime trade and colonial administration during the 19th and early 20th centuries. Traditional architecture in the Pacific Islands reflects adaptations to local climate conditions and available building materials. In areas with abundant timber, such as the larger Melanesian islands, houses were typically constructed with wooden frames and thatched roofs made from palm leaves or grasses. These structures were designed to facilitate airflow while providing protection from sun and rain. In coral atoll environments, where timber was scarce, buildings were constructed using a combination of coral limestone, pandanus, and coconut palm materials, creating structures that could withstand periodic cyclones and storm surges. The traditional economic activities in Pacific Island communities centered around subsistence agriculture, fishing, and the gathering of wild resources. Agricultural practices varied with island type and size. On high islands with permanent streams and rivers, irrigated taro cultivation was common, with elaborate terracing systems developed on some islands to maximize arable land on steep slopes. On atolls and low islands, cultivation focused on drought-resistant crops such as coconut, pandanus, and giant swamp taro grown in specially prepared pits that reached down to the thin freshwater lens floating atop the saltwater table. Fishing and marine harvesting remain important subsistence and commercial activities throughout the Pacific. Traditional fishing methods include hook and line techniques, netting, spearfishing, and the construction of fish traps or weirs. These activities follow lunar cycles and seasonal patterns of fish abundance, reflecting deep ecological knowledge that has been accumulated transmitted across generations. Contemporary economic activities in the Pacific Islands have diversified to include tourism, commercial agriculture, fishing, mining, and various service industries. Tourism represents a significant economic sector for many island nations, particularly Fiji, French Polynesia, Cook Islands, and Samoa. The sector accounts for 20 to 70% of GDP in these countries, though visitor numbers and associated economic benefits vary considerably across the region. Migration patterns in the contemporary Pacific include significant movement from outer islands to main islands, and from island nations to metropolitan countries such as New Zealand, Australia, and the United States. This outmigration is driven by various factors, including limited economic opportunities on smaller islands, educational aspirations, family reunification, and concerns about climate change impacts. Some smaller atoll nations, such as Tuvalu and Kiribati, have populations living overseas that equal or exceed those remaining on the home islands. Traditional navigation in the Pacific developed into a sophisticated system that enabled voyages across thousands of kilometers of open ocean without instruments. Master navigators memorized the rising and setting positions of stars, patterns of ocean swells, cloud formations, the behavior of birds and marine life, and other environmental cues that could guide their vessels to distant destinations. This traditional knowledge was preserved through oral transmission, often in the form of chants, stories, and specialized training that began in childhood. The cultural significance of the ocean in Pacific traditions is reflected in numerous legends, songs, and religious practices. The sea is often perceived as both provider and pathway, a source of sustenance, and a connection to other islands and peoples. Certain marine species are considered sacred in various island cultures, and traditional conservation practices include periodic fishing taboos that allow marine resources to recover following intensive harvest periods. The pace of life in many Pacific Island communities follows seasonal and diurnal rhythms that reflect environmental patterns and cultural traditions. Daily activities often begin early, before the heat of the day becomes intense. Midday hours may be reserved for rest during the hottest part of the day, with activities resuming in the cooler late afternoon and early evening. This cyclical pattern creates a distinctive temporal experience that differs from the more rigid scheduling typical of urban environments in industrialized nations. As we conclude our journey through the peaceful island archipelagos of the South Pacific, we can appreciate the timeless quality of these tranquil environments where land and sea exist in intimate relationship. The islands themselves change only imperceptibly over human lifespans, with the exception of occasional dramatic events such as volcanic eruptions or major storms. The seasonal cycles that govern both natural processes and human activities return year after year with reassuring regularity. This continuity offers a soothing perspective that contrasts with the rapid pace of change in many aspects of modern life. The islands remind us that some things endure, following rhythms measured not in minutes or hours, but in days, seasons, and generations. This expanded temporal perspective can help us find a sense of peace and proportion in our own lives. As you drift toward sleep, imagine yourself resting comfortably on a peaceful shore, with gentle waves lapping at the edge of soft sand just a few meters away. The surrounding ocean extends to the horizon, its surface reflecting the last light of day or the first stars of evening. Allow yourself to synchronize with the unhurried rhythm of the waves, letting go of the day's concerns and entering the rejuvenating realm of rest.